Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Des Moines City Council workshop for Monday, November 19th. Our first item on the agenda this morning is a library master plan update. So, proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. I'm Greg Hyde, Director of the Des Moines Public Library System. This morning I'm going to present an overview of the strategic planning initiative and the facilities master planning process that the library has now entered into. So to give a reference point, why a master plan, why a strategic plan? After we had completed the Franklin Avenue Library construction last year, we looked to the 10-year facility study, and we also looked to our strategic planning study, and we found that both were woefully out of date, and that we needed to look at several portions of those plans and resubmit those plans for consideration. Things within those plans that were not up to date were things such as advancements in technology had not been adequately addressed. There's a shift to virtual library technology and use of social media that were not part of the strategic planning initiative that now was out of date, nor the 10-year facility planning study. Also, we're looking at issues of downloadable titles versus books, videos, DVDs that are checked out of libraries. Also, the realities of an aging building infrastructure. There are two buildings that were renovated that are past their actual age of existence. We have a 30-year-old building on the south side that we're now entering into the 40th year of use that we need to take a really good look at. Also, we needed to look at the provision of services and the new economic realities. The revenue streams from the city need to be supplemented with other revenue streams, and we need to look at those. And also, there's a new desire for cooperative services among city departments. For economies of service and economies of scale, we need to look at participating with other library services or with other services within the city, such as the Park and Recreation Department. Are there buildings that we can share services with, and are there services that we can both with the Park and Recreation Department and the library provide to the public? And there are other departments that we can do the same within the city. And then we need to address areas of the community that are not served, which were not addressed in the first facilities management plan nor the strategic plan. And by that I mean areas of the city that are not adequately served, populations that are not adequately served, as well as different, what I call sub-communities, such as, is the library adequately serving the business community? So we entered the process of looking for a consultant. The funding for the project is shared by the city and shared by the Library Foundation. 50% of the funding for the project comes from CIP funding, and that's $50,000. The other 50% of the project comes from a grant from the Library Foundation, which again is $50,000. So we entered into an RFP process where we sent out RFPs to 38 national firms and local firms. And of those 38, we received 6 viable planning studies and proposals from I think it was 5 national firms and 1 local firm. And from that group of 6, we selected the nationally recognized Ivy Library Group. They're right outside Pennsylvania. They both planned and they have looked at facilities across the nation. They just finished a project with the San Antonio Public Library and the Boston Public Library, and they're completing a plan with the Cumberland Library in Pennsylvania. For a local group, we selected the SPPG, the State Public Policy Group, to take care of needs that we have on the local level and work with the national, such as how do we find different demographic areas to interview in the Des Moines area, and also how do we find the leaders in the community that we want to have interviews with to discover how they feel we're meeting out library services to the community, as well as what are future library services that we need. But there's another important part that SPPG is going to play with us. After everything is said and done in March of next year, and we have the plan in hand, and we're beginning to develop the activities for the plan, we want to, every year for the next 5 years, have SPPG come back to us and meet with us to see if we're actually completing the activities, if we're obtaining the objectives, and if we're reaching our goals. So SPPG will help benchmark the process after we have the document in hand to see that we're actually meeting our goals and providing the future services to the public. So let me take you through the schedule, what we've done so far, and what we're going to be doing in the future. In September, we signed the contracts, and we had introductory launch meetings between the consultants and the library board and the senior management staff as to what were the expectations of both and what was the actual process. Then for the next part of the month, we submitted many, many documents to both consultant groups. These were documents of past planning practices, statistics, future goals of the city, future goals of the library, CIP planning, and GIS planning, everything that we could send to them on paper or in electronic file format that they could use to familiarize themselves with the library system and the city of Des Moines. And then we started into drafting surveys that I'll talk about a little bit later. In October 2012, we started working with the data consultant, researching the demographics of Des Moines, GIS information and tapestry information of what population areas are, where the demographics are of the community. At the same time, the facilities consultant came from California to look at the libraries, armed with maps and GIS information and repair records. This consultant looked at every one of our library facilities, crawled all over the building for a week and a half to see what was needed, how the buildings were working. He interviewed people coming into the library to see how the building was meeting their needs. He even talked to the school system to see how they had planned out their service areas with their buildings. After that, we continued working with formulating the surveys, and then for 1 week, the consultants came to the library again to talk to the actual library board and senior management and the foundation, where we went through a workshop process. We went through SWOT processes, what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats of the library system. We developed Boston matrices of what we should be working on in the future, and different tools like that. So it gave the consultants a good grasp of where the library board was and where we think we would be going in the future. In November, we developed with the SPPG group. Part of the whole plan was to interview 25 civic leaders and policymakers within the community. These are people in the community that we would have one-on-one interviews with to find out where they thought the library system was in meeting its responsibilities for service to the public, and also where they feel that the library should be in the future. Of the 25 civic leader group, His Honor the Mayor and Rick were part of that group that will be interviewed, and also we asked the mayor to choose 3 people from you, the City Council, to be part of the process as well. And the mayor chose Chris Coleman, Brian Meyer, and Skip Moore to be interviewed for the process as well. Then what we did is we started really getting to the point of generating the web and telephone surveys for targeted audiences. These are going to be telephone surveys to people 18 years of age or older in the community to ask them the same questions, only synthesized down into an 8-minute process of how they feel the library's meeting out its responsibilities. Are these people being served by the library? And what do they see in the future their service needs being? In the last part of November, we're going to be launching surveys specifically to the library board, the library staff, the friends groups of the different libraries, city departments, and to the general public. These will be surveys that will be online. They will be advertised, such as to the general public. They will be advertised across the media spectrum to say, please go to this site and take this short survey for the library system to tell us your needs, to tell us how we're doing. In December of 2012, we will be conducting the 6 focus groups to targeted audiences. Here again, SPPG will be helping us to identify these people. There will be 20 people per focus group to ask them more in-depth questions about the service that the library is providing, as well as what services are needed in the future. And these 6 demographic groups, these 6 focus groups, are going to be families with children as one group, seniors, another group will be teens. We're going to have one group be the members from the Latino community, where we will ask them how we are serving them, and what needs that they have in the future. We're using this as a model that will be folded into the strategic plan of the future, where we will go out to other diverse communities within Des Moines to do the same thing. So we're not just picking out the Latino community in this process, but we're using them as a model for the future to go out to each community and ask the same thing. The 5th focus group will be young professionals, and the 6th focus group will be change agents. Those people in the community that have brought change to the Des Moines area and will bring change to the Des Moines area. So then in December, we will go ahead and start conducting the 800 telephone surveys of the Des Moines residents. Now, you may have seen us publicize that there were going to be 400 telephone surveys, but I was able to negotiate in the last week an increase to 800 because I wanted to have us also call different businesses, nonprofit groups. We want to expand it to more than just the citizens of the community, but we want to expand it to people that work within our community. The facilities consultant will come for a second site visit to answer the questions that he has after studying all the information and digesting the information that he has gained from visiting us before. And then the consultants will begin a national study of comparable libraries across the United States. They're going to look at libraries of the same size and cities of the same size to benchmark us against them, to see what are they doing, what are they planning in the future, to see if we can't also mimic some of what they're doing. In January, the consultants will analyze all this information, interviews, everything, and begin to draft their plan. And in February, they will be sending us a draft of their plan so that we can see if they are on focus and if they are on target with the deliverables that we've asked for. And then in March of 2013, the final plan will be published and will be given to us. And at that point, we'll distribute the plan to all of you, and we'll also initiate a PR campaign to show the public where we're going in the future and what we're doing. But then the real work begins. Then we have to develop our activities and start actually working toward achieving the goals of the plan. So what are the goals in all of this? Well, we want to evaluate the current services for relevancy and effectiveness. Are we doing what we should be doing? And we want to determine the most effective use of the current library facilities. We have very nice facilities now that have been renovated, and a new facility that's 5-6 years old in the downtown area. Are we using these facilities to the best possible, most succinct use for public service? We want to determine the future of library service needs in Des Moines, develop a plan for future technologies and communication. We want to determine the role of library in future economies. Where are we going to go for future revenues? Where are we going to go for revenues that balance those that come from the cities? Also determine areas of unserved populations. As I mentioned, Bosnian community, are they being served adequately? Different areas of town and different businesses. We also want to evaluate the conditions and life cycles of these existing library facilities and determine if we're in the best location that the library has for facilities in the city. We want to address cooperative service roles with other departments, as I mentioned before, and one of the goals is to explore alternative service delivery models and methods. Should we enter into mail a book to the different people? Is it more cost effective? But basically, the goals of this endeavor is to create a blueprint to deliver the best future library services to citizens and identify the best use of facilities to deliver those services. So in closing, are we going to have buildings? Is the plan going to tell us that we need buildings like the new Franklin Avenue Library? What are we going to do with the Forest Avenue Library? Is it going to be a shared facility between another city department and ourselves? What are we going to do within those facilities? Are we going to do it virtually? Is this what we're looking at in the future? This is what I call a red box for libraries. 3 library systems have purchased this. The woman is looking at 3 rows of books that are kind of like your dry cleaner, where the books go round and round, and when you get to a book that you want, you swipe your card, press the button, and you check out a book from this facility. After you're done reading the book, you return it to this facility. If you have a hold that you want to put on a book, the book can be delivered here and you can pick it up from here. There are 4 different screens on each side of the facility, or I guess you would call this a machine, that allow you to swipe your card and get on the internet. And then it also has interactive screens that kids can have story hours from. Is this what we're looking at in the future? And then also, we're looking at this plan to address how are we going to meet the needs of the community in the future, since we're going to a small form function, your iPads, your tablets, your smartphones, and how are we going to address your social media services, because right now about 25 to 20% of our communication with the public in the Des Moines area is via social media. How are we going to deal with this? And we hope that the plan will show us the way. We have some inkling, since we're professionals and we've been with this. We somewhat know where we're going to go, but we need the input from the citizens. We need the assistance of these experts in the field to point the way and blend with our ideas where we're going to go for future library services. So at this point, are there any questions or any comments that I may answer?
A couple of comments and or thoughts, Greg. Since we are investing significant dollars in having the consultants come in, will there be any discussion or research as to sharing of services on a metro-wide basis?
Is there a way that we could have that part? I know that that's a much bigger issue, but if just to get a sense, I know we've completed our major CIP, other communities have as well, and I know we've had discussions at the MAC that library services on a metro-wide basis makes some sense. We might need some legislative change to do it.
What we're going to have is we're going to have a 7th focus group, and we're inviting representatives from all of the library systems boards to come and have a focus group with our library board to look at sharing of services. We may start small with perhaps our circulation systems or purchasing policies, that sort of thing. But we feel that this is the first the first step that we can make toward trying to share services with different libraries within Polk County.
Okay. Thank you. That's good. I'm glad to hear that. And then my other comment was hearing between, you didn't come out and say it, but listening, I think, carefully to what you were saying. The Southside Library building is old, and the question is whether or not it needs to be replaced. Knowing, I'll speak for Brian, Brian has always had an issue with not having a library in his ward. There is probably a high possibility that you could be looking at a new site that would be sufficient for all of the South Side. Having said that, I guess I'd like to have an opportunity to be involved in those discussions, be a part of the group. And I heard Forest Avenue, what's going to happen with Forest Avenue. I guess the question I would raise, of the 25 people that you have, is there a way that those of us that have potential impact on libraries in our areas, if we could be involved?
Certainly. We've had just 2 polite cancellations to the invitation to be a part of the group. And so I'm sure that we could accommodate you and have you interviewed as well. If you would like to be a part of this interview process, just please give me a call and we will make it so.
Thank you.
Any other questions that you have that I may answer or comments?
That's right.
Mayor and Councilor, just one little thing, Greg, that you mentioned in the presentation that I think is quite interesting is the possibility of trying to look at collaboration not only with suburban communities but also within the city organization. So if you look at our park and rec operations and libraries and you perhaps schools as well, look for ways that those entities can work together more effectively. Of course, that's a long-term strategy, but it offers some real potential, I think, to save money and to improve service on a sort of a citywide basis as it goes forward. So I applaud you for having that in your study outline. I think it's something that holds some great potential for us.
Thank you.
All right, let's move ahead to the railroad-related street closure update.
Can we switch to the document here? Mayor, council members, Jason Van Essen with the city's planning staff. I'm going to give a brief intro. This morning we are providing you with an update of the Union Pacific Railroad crossing project. Earlier this year, the railroad came forward with a proposal to vacate 4 crossings. I'm going to show you quickly on these maps the crossings. One, Hull Avenue to the west of Delaware. 2 in the Laurel Hill neighborhood, southeast 34th Street, southeast 36th Street, south of the fairgrounds. The last one we haven't had as much discussion about, but I did want to point out, this is Cumming Industries. This is a 4th one that they're looking at. Scott Avenue to the west of this crossing has already been vacated. There's a fence there. On the east side of the crossing, there's a barricade that Public Works installed to keep people from entering the crossing. So this one actually doesn't function as a crossing, but will be a part of the process as it comes forward. We have representatives from Union Pacific, and Diane, if you want to go ahead, thank you. They're going to give a PowerPoint presentation, kind of discuss their project. This presentation is very similar to the one that was given a couple weeks ago at the Botanical Center. I believe they did some updates just to add some additional information. This summer we had some initial meetings in the neighborhood, and then we did a follow-up at the Botanical Center. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brenda.
Good morning. My name is Brenda Mainwaring. I'm Director of Public Affairs for Union Pacific for Iowa and Nebraska. With me this morning is Eric Bauer, who is our Senior Manager of Train Operations here in Des Moines, and Mike Blackley, who is our Manager of Public and Industry Projects, who does all the engineering work with communities throughout Iowa, Minnesota, and Nebraska. I'm going to run through the presentation quickly because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for your questions. But I do want to take a point of privilege at the beginning to thank the staff and the several council members who have been working with us on this project for 2 years now. It's rare that we have an opportunity to have such a collaborative process where we can start with an idea, work through concerns both within the staff and within the community to come up with a project that at the end of the day is going to serve as many interests as possible. And in particular, Jason Van Essen and Jennifer Bohack have really been with us through the whole process. So thank you especially to them. I know that I've talked to Rita Connor several times about what the city wants to do with rail service, and I know that all of you are very tuned into the value of rail service and what it can mean to the city of Des Moines. We are the most fuel-efficient transportation option. We're the least polluting of all the transportation options. We are the best alternative to a non-taxpayer funded mode of transportation to keep some of those heavy trucks off of the roadways. And rail is definitely here to stay and is in fact increasing substantially. Particularly in Des Moines, we have 170 employees in Polk County, an annual payroll of $12 million, and more than 100 customers who ship goods. Some of those are very large customers, some of those are very small customers. About 12 trains a day come into Short Line Yard. That's the yard here in Des Moines. Those are trains that handle business that either loads or unloads in Des Moines. So half to 2/3 of our business is local here in Des Moines. What you see that we're talking about today is local business. Another 5 to 10, depending on season, passes through Des Moines. This is the equivalent of about 6,000 truckloads daily that is not traveling on Des Moines roadways. We've invested about $15 million in the area since 2005. We have several $1 million more we want to invest if we can get capacity. So the purpose of our project here is many-fold, and it's really driven by the fact that the city had some significant concerns about traffic flow, vehicle traffic flow through the east side of Des Moines. We want to improve train movement so that we can reduce those vehicle traffic backups at road crossings. In addition to that, we need to create some rail capacity to serve expanded operations and to serve current and future needs of local and regional industries. Some of what Des Moines would like to do in terms of adding rail infrastructure, it would be extremely difficult for us to add any customers rail-served customers with the capacity that we currently have. We simply don't have enough room to add much more work to what we're already doing. And then in addition, removing the unused rail bridge. Obviously, the Corps came to you, I think, over a year ago now to say that that rail bridge down on the south end is a potential capacity constraint. We are already in the process of removing that. We wanted to make sure we got that underway, although we haven't made a final agreement on the whole package. We wanted to get that underway so it was out of the water before the next flood season. So our total investment with this package will be $1 million for public roadway improvements, and then an additional $1 million on infrastructure that is primarily to serve public benefit. Improving train flow on the east side in order to improve traffic flow. One of the most important things we're going to do, and one of the most expensive single items for us, is to install power switches. This picture that you see here is a conductor throwing a manual switch. Currently, we have a series of manual switches going into our yard on the west end. Every time they need to go into the yard, the conductor gets off the train, throws a switch, gets on the train, moves forward, gets off the train, throws a switch, gets back on. You can see how that would slow traffic down significantly as they have to throw those switches. We will power up those switches. It is, as I said, a very considerable investment, but it will reduce train delays. Estimated 25 to 30%. Could be more than that. Now, it's a very tight curve into there, so we're going to still have 10 to 15 mile an hour trains. They're not going to move quickly, but they will continue to move as opposed to the starting and stopping that you currently see. This can only be fully effective if we get the closure of Hull, Southeast 34th, and Southeast 36th, which I'll discuss in a minute. This gives you sort of the corridor, just so everybody knows what we're talking about. You can see down at the bottom there is that sharp curve into the rail yard. It's an east-west rail yard and a north-south line serving it, so we have to make that 90-degree turn. And you can see all of the road crossings that go across there. As you can see, Dean, Grand, those are right down there at the south end. Those are the ones that get blocked most often when we're going into the yard, and those are the ones where we would clear the traffic into the yard. So that's where the vehicle traffic will move more smoothly. The city's done some studies on the traffic impact. As you can see there on Hull, it's 2,800 daily. On Southeast 34th, 420. The number in parentheses was fair time traffic. 36 was 150 vehicles a day. Again, the numbers in parentheses, fair time traffic. So the total count is about 3,300 that will be redirected by closures, and approximately 19,000 on a daily basis who would benefit by the roadway improvements. This is very dense. I'm going to give you the high-level view. We don't have enough room north of Hull and south of our switch to hold trains. What that means is if we park a train north of Hull, we're blocking the northbound trains south. If we park over Hull to let the northbound trains proceed, obviously we're blocking Hull. Closure of Hull Avenue will create sufficient space so we can hold trains north of the remaining at-grade crossings until the train is cleared to enter the yard. So we will reduce the number of blocked crossings on that east side corridor by either holding trains north, and northbound trains can still access the north-south line until they're actually cleared to enter the yard. Combined with the power switches, this will allow us to move the trains into the yard much more quickly. We do have to have a permanent closure. We are a common carrier. That means we have an obligation at a federal level to provide service. We operate for thousands of customers in 23 states, and it is not possible. We have 2,000 trains in our system every single day, more or less every single day. We cannot schedule those trains and the operation of those trains around intermittent crossing closures at any particular crossing. So we need a permanent and complete closure at those crossings. We are prepared to make substantial investment, as I mentioned. That's based on a business case, and it's based on the case of assuming complete and permanent closure of Hull, Southeast 34th, and Southeast 36th Street. In the absence of those, we would have to reevaluate the business case. Closure of Hull also creates the opportunity for some expansion that ADM has planned, which of course would also meet some additional jobs, and they have some roadway improvements we're not going to get into here. As Jason mentioned, we've had several community meetings and we've looked at those concerns. The central topic of concern at the neighborhood meeting for the whole closure had to do with the flow of truck traffic. After that initial meeting, the city went back in and remodeled the traffic patterns, reconfigured the roadway improvements for a better solution. I am not going to get into great detail on this because the city is going to give you a little bit of information. But you can see that it has to do with adding turning lanes, adding left turn lanes, intersection improvements. There's some modifications at the crossing location. So there's a lot of work that's being done to improve the flow of traffic through the neighborhood there. This is a close-up of what they're talking about for turn lanes at Hall and Dixon. Southeast 34th and Southeast 36th. This is necessary because if we're going to move those trains faster into the yard, we have to have some place to put them. As it is right now, we do not have enough capacity in the yard to move those trains in quickly. We can power up the switches, we can close Hull, but if we don't have any place to put the train in the yard, it doesn't do us too much good. This will also increase the capacity for us to handle existing and future business. It also does eliminate the train whistle necessity at those crossings. Once those crossings are closed, we don't have to blow whistles. And again, permanent closure is necessary for the reasons I mentioned before. At the community meeting, we heard a lot about potential flooding and isolating the neighborhood. And so we looked at things that we could do in order to reduce that risk. This is a fairly dramatic change from our original plan. What we're going to do is install a new crossing that reinstitutes Southeast 38th Street. That will be a permanent vehicle. It will be open 24/7 to vehicles. That runs from Scott Avenue to Laurel Hill Road. We'll move the crossing, the flashing lights and the safety arms from 34, so that will be a protected crossing. And then in the event of flood, we will allow the vehicle traffic to use our right-of-way on an emergency basis on a legitimate roadway there. Between Southeast 34th and the new Southeast 38th Street, so that if it's not possible to use Scott to get to Southeast 38th, they can go along our right-of-way to get there. You can see just a little bit where that emergency access road would be and where 38th Street would be. We're also going to do some improvements at Dean Avenue so that there's left turn lanes there. Enough room to get the flow of traffic a little bit better at the corner of Dean and East 30th Street. And again, the traffic count just for your information. I ran through that very quickly, but I want to make sure we have time for questions, and I believe that Jason and Jennifer has some comments.
Thank you, Brenda. Jennifer Bohack, City Traffic Engineer. I was just going to talk a little bit about some of the work that we've done in regards to looking at the traffic impacts in regards to this proposal. There have been traffic reviews by both Snyder and Associates, who prepared a comprehensive study of the proposed closure of Hull Avenue. In addition, the Traffic and Transportation Department here at the City of Des Moines has gathered counts both before and during the fair to see what type of daily traffic that we're looking at, and taking a look at what improvements would be needed as that traffic would be rerouted in regards to these proposed closures. What we've found is that the impacts are generally local. However, the benefit is generally community-wide. What we're looking at, as Brenda mentioned, is the impact at that local level is about 3,300 vehicles a day, whereas that benefit is closer to 19,000 vehicles a day at your Dean, your Grand, your Walnuts, that will no longer be blocked as long, and your Hubble Avenues, so it is a local impact for a greater community-wide benefit. So we took a look at what needed to be done to kind of mitigate those local impacts. What could we do? One of the things that we heard in regards to the Hull Avenue closure was that a lot of the trucks on ADM currently stack up along the roadway edge there and cause a lot of blockages for businesses in that area. ADM has done substantial improvements, automating their check-in and unloading process and creating more storage on site so that blockages and those kind of stacking has been virtually eliminated through the process they've done just to improve their on-site improvements. In addition, we looked at how trucks will now have to come in to that area of Hull Avenue and that industrial park. A lot of the trucks, as Brenda mentioned, Snyder and Associates did an actual survey of the drivers and how they're coming in and out of that area as they drop off at ADM. And a lot of them do come from the freeway using Euclid. So what we'll be doing is looking to extend that left turn lane and also upgrade the signal to include a left turn arrow, which will get those trucks into Dixon quicker. We'll also be widening out the intersection of Dixon and Hull to provide for better turning movements for trucks in all directions at that intersection. And Guthrie and Dixon will also get some signal upgrades and some additional turn lane striping. One of the other intersection improvements that we looked at was East 30th and Dean. East 30th and Dean has been a problematic intersection even at the fair time and such. And one thing we'll be able to do is add left turn lanes in all directions and also a westbound right turn bay, which will help traffic on Dean get back up onto East 30th and get up to University, both during fair times and non-fair times. There will also be a new emergency access road. This will run on railroad right-of-way, will be used during flooding times. And then, as Brenda mentioned, a new crossing at Southeast 38th Street. A couple of things we heard about traffic impacts at that local level were ability to get across the tracks 24/7, which that crossing at Southeast 38th Street will provide. And then, of course, the flooding concerns, which that new emergency access road will help to address those flooding concerns. However, there are local impacts that we will be unable to mitigate. There are businesses on Southeast 34th Street that provide a lot of business to the fair. If Southeast 34th Street is closed, they will have to go down to Scott and go out to Southeast 38th and go up to the fair, or go over to Southeast 30th and go up to the fairgrounds. So that will be an impact at that level. There's also some concerns about bicycle and pedestrian connectivity. The pedestrian and bicycle connection at Southeast 34th, Southeast 36th, and Hull will be closed as well, along with these roadway closures. Some of the things that we're looking at in the area of Hull is providing some type of buffer area or bike lane over the viaduct for bikes to use Guthrie in that area to get across. And in the area of Southeast 34th Street, currently bicyclists are coming down the Gailey-Wilson Trail to Scott, going up Southeast 34th Street to Dean to get into downtown. Well, we do have the new Southeast Connector, which starts construction next year and will be completed in 2016, which will provide direct connection from Scott to Southeast 30th to the new Southeast Connector into downtown from the Gailey-Wilson Trail, either via a multi-use path or bike lanes on the road. So the connection and that impact will no longer be direct. There will be some alternatives that we're exploring to kind of address some of those concerns. So right now I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jason to kind of talk a little bit about process and where we go from here.
Thank you. We just have one last slide here. Vacations had to go through public hearing process. This just outlines a rough schedule for the process. First starts with the Planning and Zoning Commission. When the slide was put together, we didn't know the date of that, but that is going to be December 20th. P&Z will hold a public hearing on the proposal. Then that would come before you in January, likely your second meeting with the December 20th P&Z date would push that back a little bit. You'll receive and file the recommendation. We'll have some preliminary terms with the railroad and ask for your action on that. If you direct us to proceed in January, then throughout the spring and in the summer, we would develop a final agreement with the railroad. That'll take a little while because we'll have to get our legal team and their legal team together and to sort that out. So we don't know exactly how long that'll take. So 2013 would come back to you with final agreement and then also the actual action to do the vacations. Any other steps, 2014, all these improvements that have been outlined would actually be bid and constructed, or we wouldn't construct them, we'd bid them out. They'd be city projects. The railroad would pay for them, but we would be facilitating that construction. So you would see those contracts coming back to you throughout 2014. We're happy to answer any questions you might have and go from there.
Mr. Foley.
Just a quick specific question. At the end you were commenting on the budget implications, and you mentioned that we'd run the projects, but we'd be taken out of the financial cost. Is there any financial cost associated with this? Service roads, anticipated improvements that we need to make because of rerouting traffic patterns?
All those improvements with the turning lanes, turning radiuses, the emergency road, 38th Street, those are all projects that need to be undertaken, but Union Pacific has agreed to pay for those, so there'd be a transfer of funds. There might be some incidental costs within there, and I can let Jennifer talk a little bit more about, there has been some a grant for traffic safety funds for some of the improvements, so it wouldn't be completely Union Pacific, but they would kind of be that match.
Yeah, if we would have flooding down there, how would Johns Route and Turkey Time get their trucks out? What routing would they have to take? Because right now they use 34th there.
Correct. There is the 7th Ward Ditch and 4 Mile Creek are kind of the opposite ends of that street, and there are times where both of them flood at the same time and pin people in, and that's where we went down the track of the emergency road. I know they have concerns about whether their truck traffic can accommodate on that emergency road. We haven't designed it, so I don't know what we can do to accommodate truck traffic and turning radiuses. It may be something that can be explored. I've been honest with them that you know, it's really an emergency road to be open for a few days at a time, hopefully once a year or so at most, and it's not really something there to allow for typical everyday traffic. They obviously would have the ability, more so than a car, to go through some of that pond, but certainly they wouldn't want to take any risks with their vehicles. So we don't have a clear answer for that or a way to address that yet.
Okay, so you're going to continue to work on that then?
Yeah, we need to work.
Some idea, because, you know, probably sooner or later it's going to occur.
Sure. No, absolutely.
Skip.
Do you know how long a train can legally block a crossing?
I do not, but I think Brenda probably can answer that question.
I can tell you that there was a federal lawsuit recently that indicated that the Surface Transportation Board has the authority to regulate all train traffic and how long a train can be across a crossing, and they do not have a regulation on that.
There is no regulation.
Correct.
So when I pull up to Walnut and the crossings there and the engines are just passing, I sat there for 45 minutes. According to your proposal here, it's going to reduce that time from 30 to 34 minutes.
We would hope it would reduce it more. It's, you know, it's one of those things where you're kind of trying to make an estimate about how long it's going to take. We're giving you an estimate that probably is on the low side because we don't want to disappoint you later. Essentially, the federal government says that in order for interstate transportation to proceed, the railroads have to be able to conduct business, and we cannot get into the yard any faster than that. What we're proposing will allow us to get into the yard as quickly as possible. So what we're proposing is the best that we can do. By holding trains out north of all the at-grade crossings, by putting the fastest possible switches going into the yard, it's still a 90-degree turn.
Okay.
Christine?
I've got a
Brenda.
couple more questions yet.
You go ahead.
For Jason. I want to echo what Bob said about that emergency road. It's going to be necessary that that's built to standards that'll support probably 80,000 pounds of truck traffic at a time, and the turning radius at 38 is a great concern.
Sure.
The other question would be is that they're moving the lights up to 38th Street. This probably goes back to Brenda, but that's on the Iowa Railroad line there. Who's going to be responsible for the maintenance of those lights?
Our property line's right there where the 38th Street is, and we will have some of the equipment will be out on the Iowa Interstate, but we do have reciprocal agreements with them that we can maintain the equipment where it's installed.
So you're planning on taking your line clear up to 38th?
Presently we own up to that 38th Street location.
Because early on in this process, we were told that you're only going to go up to where the ball diamonds are, approximately 36th Street.
Yeah, well, we've researched that, and put that street in there, and we did research the property ownership, and that is our property out to 38th Street.
Okay. I've got one more question for Jason. One of the issues that's come up with the neighborhoods is the flooding at Southeast 30th and Dean, which I have personally witnessed under downpour conditions. It's impossible to get through there also. What are we doing to mitigate that then? That just cuts off another access for that neighborhood.
30th and Dean.
30th and Dean.
I'm not sure that we've, through this process, that's been brought forward and we've looked at that. Our focus really, it was, we heard a lot of concerns at that neighborhood meeting in the summer about the 7th Ward ditch and 4 Mile Creek, and if those folks on 34th and 36th couldn't go north, they'd be pinned in. So that's really been the focus of our efforts.
Well, they made it plainly clear at one meeting that when 30th and Dean is flooded, then they have to take Dean to the east up the hill, and under high flow conditions there, the 3 and 4 inch rock they've got in the ditch wash out on the street, and they can't go that direction either. So now they're blocked in.
We did pass that on to...
Staff has indicated they're not willing to do anything about the rocks in that ditch. If we're not going to do anything at 30th and Dean, now we've got a neighborhood that's going to be blocked in and they can't get out or in.
We did pass that on to
Jason,
Public Works.
Let me just interrupt for a second. Sure. Mr. Moore, those are great questions. I don't think we have good answers for you right now, but we have time within this process to research that. We will do that. You've talked to me before about that ditch, and I've talked to Public Works. We'll get back to you on that and look at it again. I understand the concern that you're bringing forward.
Thank you.
Jason, I'll start with you. Looking at the process that you've outlined here, can you share with me, did this go before Traffic and Transportation just in the last week or so?
It did, just as an update item.
As an update, not with any action taken? Okay. Okay.
Oh, I was just going to say the official vacation process is P&Z and City Council with regard to following the ordinance to get it right away vacated.
Okay. And so the construction is, and assuming that this all goes forward as you've outlined, the construction would not actually begin then until construction season 2014?
Correct.
And then the improvements, back to Chris Coleman's comment about the budget, the improvements that are indicated in here, are they already in our long-range CIP? Any of them?
The intersection improvements at Euclid and Dixon, and also at East 30th and Dean are in our CIP, but the other
those are the only ones that are in the CIP right now?
Correct.
Okay. And I guess maybe this question is for Union Pacific. To my knowledge, this is the first time that there's been such a change that you've requested from the city in the time I've been on the council. I don't...
Yes, that's our understanding as well. As I said, we've been talking about this 3 years ago. We came in front of the council for a study session, I think, to talk about the concerns about East Side and what can we do about it. And so this has been a long process to figure out what we're going to do.
So what are your long-term plans, Union Pacific, then? Are you looking at this being phase one of a more comprehensive plan? I mean, the numbers that you shared with us on capacity and what you see down the road is pretty significant, so.
The U.S. DOT has done some studies that they anticipate that freight on the railroad will increase by 40 to 60% within the next decade or so. The expectation is that as population continues to grow, freight continues to grow, and that because of the traffic on the roadways, the damage to the roadways, the fuel concern trying to get, become more fuel efficient in the U.S., and the concerns about greenhouse gases, all of those reasons mean rail is going to be hauling a lot more. This corridor is very important. It's a primary north-south corridor between Kansas City and Minneapolis. It's a very important route for us. There's a lot that we can do here, but what we have to have is capacity to manage the traffic. There's a lot that Des Moines can do in terms of rail served business. I think if you talk to your economic development department, they will tell you that everybody they interview asks them if they can have rail service. That's a tough question for you to answer right now because the railroads are telling you maybe, maybe not. And so by gaining capacity, we'll be a lot able to answer that question positively.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
I think one of the real impressive now part of their analysis is the amount of trucks they take off the roads, and the deterioration of our roads, and how we're going to continue to fund when federal's cutting back on funds for the road improvements and through MPO and that. So I think that really strikes a note with me.
All right, thank you all. Appreciate it. Let's move now to the CDBG DR and LIHTC review.
Good morning, Mayor, members of the council. Matt Anderson, Assistant City Manager. This is our annual affordable housing update for you. What I'm going to provide to you today is a presentation produced by Mary Neiderbach and Dave Dunn in Community Development. And the timing of this, the reason we're here today, is we have a couple processes coming forward in affordable housing. Number one is the annual low-income housing tax credit LIHTC applications that will be before you on December 3rd at a council meeting 2 weeks from today. And then we're starting to gear up for the next allocation of the CDBG DR, the CDBG disaster recovery funds that funded projects such as the Des Moines building and the Morrow's Franklin Avenue project. That round is over. We're anticipating a new round coming up within the next few weeks that will be announced by the state. We have a little lead time in that, but we wanted to let you know that we're starting that process now to develop criteria to measure those projects and score those projects as they come through. We'll have a little more lead time than we did last time, so we're taking advantage of that, coming up with scoring criteria based on comments we heard from you and from the public in the previous round. And our process for that CDBG funding, we hope to get the criteria from the state in the next few weeks. So we're kind of operating blindly right now. We don't even know what their program is going to look like for this round, but we're producing our criteria. We're going to bring it back to you at another council workshop for you to review the process that staff has come up with. Then we'll seek the responses from the developers, and then we'll bring a recommendation forward to you. That recommendation is probably going to be in the late January, February time period. So we have a little bit of time, but I wanted to give you a heads up that we're working on that process right now. And the whole discussion of affordable housing, we kind of take them separately: low-income housing tax credit, CDBG DR, Section 8, but it always produces a larger discussion on concentration of affordable housing in the metro and in Des Moines and certain neighborhoods. So what we've done is we've taken this opportunity, since they're all coming together at the same time, to give an overview of the process. We have a few maps here showing some concentrations and locations within Des Moines and the metro, just to spur some conversation. The list has come out, as you know, of I think it's 14 or 15 projects that have requested tax credits this round. I've got that listed in here. I wasn't planning on getting into specifics on each project today, but just an overview. But feel free to ask any questions, and Mary Neiderbach's here also can answer any questions for you. Real briefly, when we talk about affordable housing, it comes with many different funding sources. They're listed here, different HUD sources, the low-income housing tax credit program, which you're well familiar with, CDBG, home. There's both state home, and there's home administered by the state and home administered by the city. Enterprise zone is used for affordable housing, and then the new CDBG DR program. We also have the voucher program, which is Section 8. That doesn't necessarily produce the housing units like we're talking about for these other funding sources, but it does provide a source for the low-income families. And as you see, the number here, that 3,200 units in the metro, 80% of which are families that live in the city of Des Moines proper. Back on that roll a little bit on CDBG versus LIHTC. I know there's been some frustration at the council level on the LIHTC and the way it's administered by the state. A lot of decision-making authority rests at the state level, not at the city level. You used to have the ability to kind of approve or not approve a project, where you would allocate points to a project. The state would allow an extra 10 points in the scoring process to projects that received city approval. Gave you a bit of decision-making on which projects you wanted to see move forward and not move forward, because it is a competitive round. Not every project will get funded. That role has really been stripped from the cities by the state. Your role is really reactive, unless there's going to be TIF money or other assistance put into a project. The program for LHTC is designed for incomes at 60% of area median income. We'll get into what that means in another slide here. Mixed income is the developer's decision. You've got a couple on this round that are mixed income, but it's generally they're generally 100% affordable projects, and those are annual allocations. On the CDBG DR, the city's role is to apply for the funding. Our role is also to really this is where you get a lot more leeway in actually coming up with the scoring criteria for what type of project, what location of project you'd like, and then an actual referral on to the state. These are incomes, families with incomes below 80% of the area median income instead of the 60 for the LHTC. And we've been encouraging mixed income on these projects. This is a one-time allocation. This won't go on forever like the the low-income housing tax credits, but all the federal regulations still apply. An example, sprinkled throughout this presentation, there'll be examples of affordable housing projects. Some you may drive by and know them as affordable housing projects, but some you just may not even realize they've been funded with low-income housing tax credits. The credit was created in the Tax Reform Act of 86. It provides indirect federal subsidies. So I'll remind you, this is not, the federal government doesn't write a check to a developer and say, here, go build some units. What it is, it's a tax credit that is given to the partnership that develops the process. We all know the developers that develop these projects. They are not the investors. They're typically finding large institutional investors that have large tax liabilities to be offset. They come in as a partner in the project, and in exchange for their cash equity going into the project, they receive tax credits and generally the tax losses and depreciation that roll off the real estate. So there's a lot of leveraging of some really big dollars in this program. The guidelines are set by the Internal Revenue Service. You'll sometimes refer to this as Section 42 housing. That's the IRS code that it references as Section 42. The credits are allocated at a statewide basis based on the state's population. And in this case, in Iowa, the credits are then administered by the Iowa Finance Authority. The state can change the way it seeks projects, the type of project it's looking for based on what is referred to as a QAP, the Qualified Allocation Plan. And the state amends that Qualified Allocation Plan every year based on what they see as needs in housing. And they change the priorities based on what they're seeing in the market, and the scoring changes accordingly. And the types of things that they will often target would be specific amenities, specific populations such as senior or handicap projects, energy efficiency, design guidelines. So all of that falls into the Qualified Allocation Plan. That sets out the criteria, which the rules that the developers have to work under. And then it also sets out the scoring mechanism. So they're going to show a preference. They might have a set aside for historic rehabilitation or handicap units. It's really at the state's discretion to set that QAP. They do seek input from developers and cities, so we provide that input as they're crafting their QAP every year, and they take that into consideration and then come up with their final rules. As we say here, in recent years, we've lobbied them on certain issues that we feel need to be changed in each annual.
Matt, you might just mention on this one, the unit cost caps has been an issue that's been of great concern to many projects here recently. You might just elaborate.
We're going to get that on another slide.
Okay.
And it's the current income limits on the 60% of area median income. That is about $45,000 for a family of 4. So it's about $60,000 on the CDBG DR, because that's at 80% of area median income. Housing may serve families or seniors, and then certain specific need populations. LHTC and home, you'll often see us pair these together, really because the rules are the same. It's easy for the developer to follow. It's easy to administer. They're both at 60% of area median income. So you're not taking a project and making a developer or a management company or the residents operate by 2 sets of rules. The home and LHTC work very, very well together. Home is a little different in that it's a direct subsidy, either a loan or a grant, a low-interest loan or grant. And as I mentioned before, both the city and state have home funds to administer. Here's a listing of projects that very familiar projects to you that have used both. You have, the City Council has set out numerous policies regarding low-income housing tax credits. Here's a few. Every few years we come through with a kind of a new set of review policies. Some of that's kind of reactionary to what the state has been putting down to at the city level. The reason this seems to get a lot of attention is because it is significant in the city. Since the tax credit program was enacted in '86, and I think the first few projects came forward, the number 83 projects in the city totaling 4,500 units. So that's a significant amount of development, and so it should get your attention. And in the suburbs, we've had 28 projects with 1,700 units. 700 of those units are in West Des Moines. So that disparity is talked about a lot here at the council level. So 700 units in West Des Moines and 4,500 units in the city of Des Moines. Projects are all over the board, to 5 units to well over 150 units. We've seen historic rehabs, historic buildings, rehabs, new construction, suburban downtown. It really runs the gamut. Generally in Des Moines, we have around 10 to 12 projects apply. Rick, I'm going to come back to your issue because I don't know which slide it's on, but I don't want to forget it. The per unit cost caps. The cost cap is a maximum per unit construction cost that the developers run up against with the Iowa Finance Authority. And why that's important here in Des Moines is because we are generally taking infill and rehab projects, not greenfield projects, not greenfield sites. And so you're looking at higher per unit costs in the city of Des Moines, particularly with historic rehabs. Historic rehabs can be tremendously expensive, but they're leveraging many, many sources of funds, many more than a greenfield site would. And the per unit cost caps have actually gone down in the last few years from IFA. I think they've gone down about $20,000 a unit. That's been a concern when you take some of our historic rehab projects like Yonkers or some smaller projects where you're looking at trying to spread a larger sum of, or a larger base cost of the project over a smaller number of units. Those per unit cost caps are something that we run into a lot, so I want to make sure I got that before I left. In previous presentations, the City Council has requested some maps, so we have some in here today to show you concentrations of units. The red dots on your map are existing LIHTC projects in the City of Des Moines. The blue are existing affordable senior projects, and then the yellow are the proposed that will be before you next week, or in 2 weeks. Then there are other federally subsidized projects that are not Section 42, different HUD programs, different federal loan programs. Also pretty much follows kind of that same geographic clustering, a little more scattered. There are some impediments to fair housing that we deal with. The state has given themselves the kind of the out to enact a 144 unit cap in allocations in the city of Des Moines. They haven't done that, or in Polk County I should say, they haven't done that yet, but they do have the ability to do that to limit any oversupply that they feel is in the Des Moines market. 144, when you're going to see the list here, we have about 700 units just in the city of Des Moines that have applied, and we're still at 97 or 98% occupancy. There's a demand for the units, and for Iowa Finance Authority to abruptly cut us off to 144, we'd have a supply and demand problem in Polk County. IFA requires a market study, but also reacts to submittals by developers. The IFA has increased points based on handicap housing in recent years, and as we've seen recently, and the developers could attest, many of the suburban communities have really shown a preference to strictly senior affordable and not family affordable housing. So when we look at this on a metro-wide basis, you see Des Moines there in the kind of this lower center of the box, and our concentration of all the various types of affordable units, and then the kind of light scattering out in the suburbs. You've got a couple in 2-3 in Ankeny, a few in Grimes. There were those few 700 units in West Des Moines that I mentioned. A lot of those are at Sun Prairie Apartments, located in one large concentration, and then pretty thin as you get around the metro. So here's going back to what we talked about with our role, the City Council's role in this. The City Council does not have any input on a prioritization of projects or a project scoring. As I said before, the city was able to give 10 points for local support. That local support has been taken away. Your real role in this that the state has asked is simply stating whether or not certain infrastructure is in place, zoning is in place, and whether there's a requirement for a local contributing effort. That in Des Moines is generally given through tax abatement, because if the project meets our tax abatement guidelines, they're given tax abatement by right. And so what comes before you in 2 weeks at the council level is simply just verifying that yes, this project is eligible for tax abatement under our current ordinance. Some projects also are requesting enterprise zone benefits, and in some cases where you could have some control would be if a project needs a new enterprise zone created. The council could decide not to create that enterprise zone. Typically, you haven't done that because you're leveraging state funds, and we've always found it to be a good thing that there are state funds coming into a Des Moines project to leverage local funds. And then you certainly have control, and there aren't any this round where projects are coming in for other economic development assistance, TIF assistance, that sort of thing. So again, the role is that there are many forms that need to go in the developer's application packet. That's part of our role. There are administrative forms that city staff does, and then that local government contributing effort form. The city has required, you'll see at the bottom, we have required developers to notify nearest neighborhoods and request a meeting with that neighborhood to present their project. So here's your list for this year, about 700 units. The top 6 are rehab of existing units, and then the bottom 8 or 9 are projects that are new projects, some rehab, some new construction. I think most of the developers are known to you. They've done work in the city of Des Moines and done some nice projects in recent years. Some multiple phase projects and a couple of downtowns.
Matt, on this schedule, there are some new ones, though. I see, I guess I'm not sure that we've worked with them a lot. Common Bond is relatively new to the community. Mm-hmm. And Rob Knutson. Yes, that is, I don't know Mr. Knutson. I know that is Mike Nelson's. It's a partner, I believe, that he's brought into the. Okay.
Is that the project tonight?
That's the project tonight.
Yeah, at 32nd. Okay. Yeah. 3 of these projects today are up for second reading of an ordinance for zoning change tonight. Okay.
Could you also add a column over there that shows how they're taxed, residential?
Yes.
Commercial?
Yes.
Because there is a difference in these?
There is.
And I'd like to know.
Okay.
Are we aware that any of these developers have applications in other areas of Polk County or the metro area outside of Des Moines?
You know, we could ask. We're not privy to the applications that have come in until they get submitted to IFA, but we could ask these developers if they've submitted any. Most of them, I mean, a few of them probably have. And you look at Hatch, generally just works in the city of Des Moines. Sherman generally works just in the city of Des Moines. Same with Anawim. Mr. Collins here today, he could probably answer that if you have a question of him. And I know that Frank Levy has done projects in the suburbs before, but I don't know what else is on the radar.
And the Douglas Woods that's up there, that's not Douglas, the same as Douglas Acres that we're reading about?
Correct.
Correct.
I just want to make
A
sure.
couple of blocks away, though.
It's a very good
Very
question.
close.
Very good question, though. Okay, you've hit on a couple of the concerns. Oh, here's our per unit cost cap issue. That cost cap, which for a 3-bedroom unit, which was 210, is now 190. And most developers would tell you our construction costs have not gone down; they've gone up since then. So that is an issue, particularly as we, as city staff and city council, try to push for better and better construction, better energy efficiency, longevity in those units, so they're not coming back in 15 years, applying for another round of tax credits to rehab them. We want life, generational projects. That's going to increase the costs, and we're getting pushed down.
Is that cap and the underlying rules, is that set administratively or legislatively?
It's part of the QAP. So is the QAP legislative or administrative? Yeah.
It seemed to me, and I've heard the manager talk about this in other ways, that, if you built something to higher standards or you used specific, strategies, LEED certified or whatever, you might earn your way into, relaxation of some ordinances or rules, in this case, the cap.
And that's what
it would seem to be something that we should all advocate for, because, you're necessarily now building, well, not as high quality of units as you did in 2011.
And that's what
meet the cap.
We're continuing to lobby IFA on that, and we will again. I think the original premise behind a cost cap was trying to be good stewards of the federal government's money, so that you didn't have affordable housing units that were granite and mahogany and better than market rate units. Well, I think that those affordable units should be equal to market rate units if they if that can be done in the market, and because we want longevity out of the housing, you want sustainable materials, long-lasting materials. The same things that we put in our tax abatement guidelines, for instance, where we're trying to get generational projects and not projects that'll be gone in 15 years. So I agree, Mr. Coleman, and we will continue to push that effort with your assistance.
Anybody else? Anything?
This hits on Councilwoman Hensley's concern. Another concern on the program is that just in general, the property taxes are, low-income housing tax credit projects are assessed differently. They're assessed based on their income generation, because rent restrictions, income restrictions, and then the rental restrictions that go along with those do put a cap on the income generation of those projects. Therefore, the assessors view them a little differently, that they have a lower assessment in general, and there's always that ability for, under current state law, that Mrs. Hensley pointed out, for a project is to condo the building, and therefore each building, although under common ownership and operates like an apartment, can receive a lower property tax assessment based on now the condo assessment versus the multifamily assessment. And then, as we saw in the maps, another concern of ours is that concentration of units, where you can really follow that map through the north, central, northeast, and then south side of Des Moines.
To that point, Rick, I think I mentioned last time, and staff was going to look at ways that we can use zoning or other things to meet city council goals on this, but I think both the issue of concentration and the fact that very few, I think only 2 this year, are coming through with a combination of both market rate and low-income housing tax credit units within one project. I think I've been pretty public that I like those where we're building a real neighborhood and not just a huge concentration of only low-income housing.
Mr. Coleman, council members, it's an extremely important point, and one of the pieces of legal advice that we've gotten recently, Mr. Lester, is that the matter of zoning you can't really take into account the method of financing. So whether or not a project is a low-income tax credit project or not doesn't really enter into, at least from a legal perspective, if I understand correctly, Jeff, it can't really enter into our deliberation. That really leaves you with the fact of whether or not you're putting other forms of assistance in, which are discretionary. Matt has mentioned that here this morning. Tax abatement, for example, is not necessarily discretionary because that's a matter of the way you've set it up as a policy. You don't really say yes or no to individual projects unless they happen to be downtown. So it's very difficult for us to exert those kinds of policy prerogatives which are very appropriate. And it gets back to the issue that Matt's talked about here. In that, frankly, I think the mayor has testified before IFON as well, and that is that the city council has very little ability to influence or set preferences among competing projects. It's quite frustrating because it really puts you in a position where you have a lot of community concern that comes to you, and you've really got no effective way to have that concern reflected in your decision making. In fact, you don't really make decision making unless you happen, in a few cases, to be putting other city resources into it. But you can't really control it through zoning, and that's the way the law is set up. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. I don't know, Jeff, if you.
That's correct. I mean, the issue here is that zoning is a predominant use-driven basis, and when we're talking about residential use, and we can even get into the concentration and density of the particular use, but when we're talking about the income or the financing related to the use, that's a different story in terms of zoning. That's not something that is really built into the system or that the system's designed for constitutionally.
Okay.
Thank you.
Matt, let's open up, unless council has anything else to say for public comment or discussion. We'll ask anybody that has anything to say to come up to the podium.
Jim Conlon, Conlon Properties. I have a recent appraisal we had completed on a project we're proposing by Iowa Research and Appraisal, and it states that there are no new multifamily projects in the city of Des Moines that are not subsidized. So we're only talking about subsidized projects. I fully support a study. I would encourage the Iowa Finance Authority and any other sponsoring subsidy to be involved, to be at the table. I know your goal is to increase your tax base and increase population. You, like any other business, must grow or you decline. I would encourage in that study that there be appraisers and land planners taking the emotion out of it. Being a developer, I know each time I want to do a project, someone accuses me of stopping up toilets or running over children. In 40 years, I've done neither. I think the apartment community, development community would assist in underwriting this project. I know we certainly would. You're going to find that 40% of the population now rents, and that's increasing. You're going to find that, as we read in the papers, that the market is turning around on new construction, but we're still 30% behind where we were in '06 and '07. Apartment construction has increased 46%, where single family has increased 18%. And last but not least, I think an elephant in the room is we know from articles in the paper and others that there is a deteriorating stock of apartments in Des Moines. I think it could be up to 1/3 of the stock. And when you turn around a project, you do it with more than just prayer. You have to have cash. And generally that's $20,000 a unit is what we've spent turning a project around. And I know you give people more time to do certain work, but I would encourage you to find whether or not they have the resources to do it. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Mark Grimm. I live at 3408 Scott in Des Moines. I'm here to speak on the Union Pacific project. I have been blocked in by those waters. I doubt if I can say anything that's probably going to stop this thing, but I do want to comment on the fact of the age and condition of the East 30th Viaduct for anybody who travels that daily. That's usually the way I go down because the East 34th Street is usually blocked by the train anyway. So if that could be somehow as a mitigation factor, if you're going to put a lot more traffic over that, although I did see the fact that the Scott perhaps closure is being mentioned, and you had brought up the fact, Ms. Inslee, that or you have any future plans? Well, they have the little railhead there down at that end by Scott, and I suspect that that will be connected to, and I'll be further blocked in when Scott is closed. I am concerned about being isolated and forced to accommodate the business expansion, but that is what it is. I've had no offers to buy my house. There is just a handful of residents that are locally impacted, as it was called. But those that are locally impacted feel the pain and feel the crunch to do something to accommodate this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, but for another hour. Only 2 points I'm going to make this morning because you've heard them.
For the record, would you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Cindy Raymond. I'm with Laurel Hill Neighborhood Association, and I live on Southeast 36th Street. The first thing is basically the moving of the loud, noisy indicators at Southeast 34th to Southeast 38th when this takes effect. I think this is adding injury to insult to those people who live there, who will have these very noisy indicators in their front yard, basically. If I can live at my house on Southeast 36th Street with an intersection that has the signs, but no loud noises for over 25 years, I think that that intersection would probably do well without waking them up as it will every time a train goes by. The second thing is, and it's not funny, I feel railroaded. I feel like all these meetings meant nothing to anyone. Few people in the city maybe. I have a petition, I'm sorry, I left it over there. And I do. I don't have all the sheets with me. I've counted 260 on the ones that I do have. These are people who are directly affected by the situation. And yes, I know the numbers that you had at the crossings, but that does not count all the other people that go through there when other functions are at the fairgrounds, all of the people who attend and are in charge of the girls softball field across the street and their tournaments and all that. Those took place after their season. More people are affected than you think. And sometimes the numbers on the paper just don't say it all. So please take my suggestion about the intersection, save somebody some harm. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
Hello, my name's Sheree Mortiz, and I'm representing the Keep Hall Avenue Open campaign in our neighborhood. I have some specific concerns about closing Hall Avenue. One is that it is a major thoroughfare for our neighborhood. I live on the east side of the tracks. My aunt lives at Luther Park on the west side of the tracks. And I can't tell you the number of times that it's been important for me to get to her quickly. One of the main concerns that we have in our neighborhoods is that it creates the appearance of a dead-end neighborhood. I think there's nothing worse than looking down a major thoroughfare and seeing a big roadblock. And that's what it appears to us is going to happen, is that you're willing to literally just cut us off. We all support our local businesses. I do a lot of business on East 14th Street, up and down the street. I go to the restaurants, I use the gas stations. I'm also a customer of Thrasher's Service. And I've had a relationship with them for over 25 years. I've owned my property since 1978. Believe you me, we've already faced a number of challenges in that neighborhood. But we unite together and we persevere. We've been flooded, but we got through that. And so we're really determined to talk about this issue and mobilize some of our neighbors and try to explain really the impact on everyday people's lives. Certainly corporate interests have been well represented here, and I understand those concerns. I'm not against capitalism by any means, and I'm certainly not against rail service, but I think that there's other options. And when you're looking at the devastation to neighborhoods, and we're talking about hundreds of families, and yet you're willing to put the burden of this project on their backs, and you're not willing to really look at the flexibility that the railroad would have, and certainly the money to back maybe a more realistic project that would protect people's properties and people's lives. Our elementary school will also be impacted because that railway literally divides our neighborhood somewhat in half, but we've always been flexible. We have parents on the west side of the tracks that use Hull Avenue to pick up their kids. We canvassed the parents waiting to pick up their kids about 2 weeks ago, and they were all appalled by the idea of not being able to use Hull Avenue. I understand that Euclid Avenue is available, and so is Guthrie Avenue. But there are real problems with that too, because Euclid floods right under the railroad overpass. When we are having more significant rain downpours, they happen more frequently, and that floods, and traffic, we have stalled cars. You know, people get caught. That is a major, major thoroughfare. And every time we have a significant rain, Euclid floods. Guthrie is another option to go around, but there are speed bumps there, and that was put there so that large trucks wouldn't use that thoroughfare. And certainly a fire engine is going to have difficulty taking that route. If the Hubble station can't help us, the default goes to East 12th. So they're going to be going down Guthrie Avenue. Also, that Guthrie overpass is also quite slick, even when chemicals have been applied. And so both of those routes are very much compromised. I'm really concerned about our access to timely emergency services. My father was a fireman with the Des Moines Fire Department, and so I know those contingencies. I used to ride in the car with him as he would practice them. So we have a lot of concerns. I hope that each one of you take time to really look at the impacts, look for some feasible alternatives that certainly I think the railroad and ADM can afford to pay for. Thank you.
Cherie, I think you had a petition too with some names. Did you bring that with you?
No, I didn't bring them today. They're still out there, but we have a lot.
Nan Stillion, 1604 24th Street Place. I don't want to address the issue we'll be addressing tonight, but I want to thank Mr. Conlon for his suggestion, because that is one of the ways to solve our problems, to rehab the deteriorating multi-complex. And I would like to ask the Iowa Finance Officer if, since the city has so little power in this business of tax allocations, does the Iowa Finance Corporation have the power to work with transportation
Dan,
units?
you need to face the microphone so we can get it on record.
Transportation units. If we could get together transportation and the developers so that we could go into the areas of the city where there are not populations, there's not the traffic problem, but the people could be transported into a place where they would get to work or get to shopping. My neighborhood now, the whole Drake neighborhood in the section around Drake, it has people in all kinds of costumes, many, many people who do not speak English, and there is congestion constantly. But if the powers of transportation and the developers could get together so there would be guarantees of the flow of people during the day as well as just at rush hours, you could solve the problem of that map where it's all in our middle to lower income areas now, which is making a significant difference in the quality of life among people who always felt that their homes would be okay and they would not have to face traffic of the sort they do. You know, I'll be going on again tonight. But this is directed at the lack of creative imagination in solving problems that not only at the city level, but at the state and federal levels. So when brainstorming can take place, problems can be solved without people like me going into another tizzy. So thank you.
Ms. Dillion, Mr. Conlon has taken the transportation concerns into his development there on Hubble because you got a DART bus coming in all the way. And he's willing to build a protective storage or a shelter for his people there. So thanks to him, he's looked at this.
And those look good. Even the Ammerman project looks good.
Right.
Mayor, I know we need to close, but could I go back to one comment made and ask the manager to make sure you communicate with the council information about the Garden School issue, the traffic that's at the intersection there, and what effort we've made to kind of identify bus traffic and traffic to the school. I'd be interested in how we're dealing with the people that live west of there.
Mr. Coleman, council members, we will certainly do that. And the other issues that were brought up and mentioned today, we'll address those as well.
Thank you.
For both you and the public that attended.
All right, seeing no more speakers, we'll look forward to seeing some of you back here this evening.
I'm going to leave that here.
Thank you. We're adjourned.
Okay.
Hey, that was fun.